Good morning, everybody, and welcome back to your Lunch Break Live. My name's Ivana Harinkyu if you're new here, and if you're not, thank you for coming back. Today is Thursday, May the 26th, and we are still working on election coverage from this week. Now, you might have known that Tuesday was election day, and we did give you coverage on Tuesday evening of returns. We've been covering that all week, and today I thought it'd be interesting to show you some maps that our own Ramsey Archibald created. Now, Ramsey's going to join me here, as you can see, to talk about some of these maps. We're going to pull them up here and kind of go through these, but they're very interesting, and they show how Katie Britt really took most of the state of Alabama. Yet she and Representative Mo Brooks are going to head into a runoff for that GOP nomination to the U.S. Senate. Now, the breakdown of these votes is very interesting, but we do know that that runoff was triggered because Katie Britt or anybody else in that race did not earn above that 50% margin to go to the nomination without a runoff. So that is why, even though these margins were pretty big, it still was not big enough to not trigger a runoff. So Ramsey, I'm going to let you go into a lot of this. You've obviously been delving into the data. I'm going to pull up a map here that I think makes it pretty easy to look at and see what exactly parts of the states went for Mo versus Katie. Now, one thing I will note really quickly on this map, I can show you another one in a minute, but on this map, Ramsey, you really just focused on at least the color coding Mo and Katie Britt.
Yeah. So basically what this is showing is which candidate, quote unquote, won those counties. Now, because we had so many candidates running, I don't think anybody got more than 50% in most counties. There were a couple that Katie Britt did get over that 50% threshold, but these just show who had the plurality of votes, so the most votes of any candidate. And as you can see, Mo Brooks is that orange color. He only got 5 counties, and that means 62 counties went to Katie Britt.
Well, and that's what I like these. I always like the maps that you do, Ramsey. They're color coded because it makes the visual learner in us kind of quickly pick up on the data here. But this one I think is especially interesting because at first glance, you look at that state, it is almost all red, which is the color that you use to associate with the counties that Katie Britt won. And you can pretty quickly say, well, how did Katie Britt not hit 50% of that vote? Because most of the state, minus those 5 orange counties that Mo Brooks won, went for Katie.
Yeah, and she got pretty close, right? She got 45% or so of the vote, so just a little shy of that threshold she needed. But it comes down to, one, you had 2 other candidates who got big percentages, so that's Mo Brooks, who is in the runoff, and then also Mike Durant, who pulled a sizable percentage of votes as well. So between all that, there was enough to keep her from breaking that 50% mark.
Well, and that one thing we should also know when you look at this map, and I'm going to go over and hover over some of these counties, especially the orange ones that Mo Brooks won. Some of the counties that Mo Brooks won, now granted, these were by pretty slim margins that he won, right? You can see in Shelby County, when you hover over these counties, you get more information. You can see Shelby County, the percent there that went for Katie Britt was about 36.2%. The percent that went for Mo Brooks was 36.4%. So a tiny margin. Granted, the way that this map looks, that and it's true that Mo Brooks won that county, but only by slight percentage. But here you can see the ones he did win were the larger counties. We've got Shelby County here, Blount County as well. Then working our way up into North Alabama and into its home region of the state, Morgan County, Limestone County, and Madison County there. Now, Ramsey, I think the question for a lot of people is that obviously we know these 2 candidates are headed into a runoff, Katie Britt and Mo Brooks. But that runoff is going to be interesting because if you just look at this map, it looks like Katie will be the clear winner here. But what's going to be interesting is when there's only 2 names on the ballot, who picks up those Mike Durant votes? Who picks up the 1% of votes that went for some of those other candidates? So what did you learn in that realm?
Yeah, I think that's the big question, right? We don't know where those votes are going to go. But I will say it looks like Mo Brooks has an uphill battle here. So Katie Britt got about 100,000 more votes than Brooks in the primary. And there are almost 170,000 votes that either went to Durant or some of those other candidates. So there's enough votes just in that universe for Brooks to make a quote unquote comeback here. But in order for him to pull it out, he would have to get 80% of the remaining vote compared to 20% for Britt, which that's, like I said, an uphill battle. That also doesn't account for, we had relatively low turnout for the primary, and you never know what will happen in a runoff. It could be even lower. Who knows? But to have to get 80% of the unaccounted for vote is pretty tough.
So when you say that, Ramsey, do you mean that essentially Mo needs to hang on to every single vote and all of those people have to show back up in the runoff? So that's, again, assuming they come back out on June 21st for that runoff. He has to hang on to those voters and pull 80% of people that voted for a candidate other than Katie Britt or himself, Mo Brooks.
Yes, that's the way the math breaks down. Now, and Mike Durant has come out and said, he's thrown support behind Brooks. And so if everybody who voted for Durant just turns around and votes for Brooks, then that's a wholly different story. Brooks would have enough votes just adding the Durant votes to take it. But again, that's assuming the same number of people show up and there's no, people who flip over to Britt.
Well, and also, too, that assumes, again, that we get this same voter turnout, which we don't know if that's going to happen in a runoff. I mean, these numbers could go either way. We do know voter turnout was pretty low this go around, this Tuesday, with about just 23% of registered voters casting their ballots on Tuesday. So you have to get all of those people to get re-excited about going out to vote. We know that this was kind of a bad weather election day. It wasn't necessarily severe weather, but it was just not a great day to leave your house if you didn't have to. The summer runoff, it's June 21st. Sometimes, Ramsey, that is a time where families want to go vacation. They want to go to the beach. They're enjoying their summer. And so many people, if you are not particularly jazzed about a candidate, you're not going to stay home in your county for your polling place so that you can go cast your ballot on that Tuesday.
Yeah, that's a really good point. And, some people may already have plans in place, for those vacations, like you mentioned. So there's no way we're going to get the exact same number of voters who turn out. It's going to be different in some way or another. But like I said, there's enough votes out there for a theoretical Mo Brooks win. We just got to see, what happens.
Well, and something I thought was interesting, and what I'm going to do here is I'm going to pull this map off, and then, Ramsey, I'm going to ask you this and let you explain while I pull up another map that you made here. So, bear with me here. But, Ramsey, I wanted to ask you, I covered Mike Durant on Tuesday night. I was at his campaign speech, and he made several comments during that concession speech about how, I believe the exact quote was he called Katie Britt a quote train wreck. And he also made comments to say, look, he was the most, in his opinion, his character stood out the most in this race, and that he definitely was a better candidate than Katie Britt. So he made multiple comments about that. He did not necessarily make those same comments about Mo Brooks. Now, during his concession speech, he didn't particularly say, go vote for Mo during the runoff, but he did make it clear that he was against Katie Britt. So do we think that that's going to have a big influence, or do we need to see Mike Durant come out, support Mo very vocally, and push for Mo to get his voters to go that way?
It's a great question. I think if he came out full-fledged support, obviously that'd be better for Mo Brooks for his outlook. It depends on how engaged these voters are, right? So I think about 150,000 people voted for Mike Durant in this primary, and if they all are really strong Durant supporters, they'll probably listen to him when he says, "Don't vote for Katie Britt." So does that mean that they stay home? Does that mean they go out and vote for Mo Brooks? We don't know the answer to that. I think, like you said, if he came out with a strong support of Mo Brooks, that might shift even more of them. But again, we got to get up to that 80% threshold, and to imagine, 80% of those, that's a high number for them to have to flip over to Mo Brooks. So.
Absolutely. Now, I did see a comment saying that color does not have anything to do with the election. I just want to make it really clear, Denise, these counties, the color coding here has nothing to do with a race or a gender issue of the counties. This is particularly just a color that Ramsey arbitrarily chose on all these places. This is not even meaning red, meaning the most Republican or anything like that. These are just colors that Ramsey chose to visually differentiate the counties on a map so you could just get that data quickly. So just these colors were just kind of chosen through a system here that Ramsey has. So this is definitely not correlated anyway. There's no real legend to the meaning of those colors. So don't overthink that. Now, Ramsey, this is a different map I pulled up, and this is about Katie Britt's votes particularly. So explain this map to me, and then I want to talk about a phenomenon in rural Alabama with Katie Britt.
Yeah, so in this one, the kind of darker sort of burnt orange color that you see there means that Katie Britt got a higher percentage of the votes, which, like you sort of alluded to, you can see in rural Alabama, much of it. And you can see in those lighter counties, she got a smaller percentage of the vote. And for the most part, those are the counties that Mo Brooks did a little bit better in. So you can see that sort of central Alabama up into North Alabama, which is Mo Brooks' home territory, as he said. Those are the counties where Mo did a little bit better, and Britt still did okay, honestly. She in the counties that even Brooks won, like you said, those margins were tight. So I think if Mo Brooks can sort of expand a lead there, that would go a long way toward making this runoff a little bit more competitive.
Well, in this map, I think, as you mentioned a second ago, you can see that even the areas that are not the darkest color here, which indicates the most support for Katie Britt, or the most voter turnout support there for Katie Britt in these counties, even the counties that she did not win, even in that North Alabama and some of that kind of mid-central Alabama going up, that middle part of the state, even those counties are not very pale, meaning that they are not showing by this color legend that you have that she had no support. There is still color to these counties in the sense that she still had support there. They're maybe not as that dark burgundy color here, that burnt color that you mentioned, where it was almost full votes for Katie, but she did not have people turn out for her.
Yeah, it's true. So her worst performing county, the county where she got the lowest percentage of the vote, was Blount County, which is one of the ones that Brooks won. It's just north of Birmingham, and she still got 34.2% of the vote. So that's more than a third of the vote in that county. So for that to be your worst performance, is to get over a third of the vote in a primary, is not too shabby.
Well, and Ramsey, we can see on, if you look at South Alabama and the almost the border counties in the state. So all of these counties that are bordering other states, bordering the state line here, it is almost like, and I think you said this earlier, it's almost like a cup that is showing out their support for Katie Britt. It's almost like a U shaped, where you can see these darker counties with that more support. Why is that? Do we know of any trend why those voters are turning out so high for her?
Yeah, I mean, it's a great question. I think a lot of those counties are rural counties, which I think is part of it. It seems like rural Alabama really turned out for Britt. One thing worth noting here is, so this color legend responds to the percent of the vote. So you look at some of these counties in South Alabama, especially, and if you look on the Mississippi border over on the west side of the state, that darkest county on this map, Sumter County, is a mostly Democratic county in the Black Belt, very rural, sparsely populated. I think in the GOP primary, this race that we're looking at here, there were less than 300 votes there. So Britt pulled like 66% or something like that of those votes, but that's a low number of total votes. So while Brooks did pretty well in some of the more urban counties like Madison County, Shelby County, notably not as well in Jefferson County, but some of those more urban areas, all of these rural counties really turned out for Britt. So it's sort of a show of force in that area.
It's almost, when you look at these numbers, she got more counties, right? That is not up for debate. She got more counties here, but the amount of voters in those counties were maybe not as high as the amount of voters in some of these counties that Mo Brooks pulled. So I do want to quickly just tab over to, and the way that people can interact with this map that you build, we're going to link that here in our comments, and you can switch between the percentage of Katie Britt votes, the percentage of Mo Brooks votes, and I believe also the percentage of Mike Durant votes, and you can kind of get that same feel. So what are we looking at here, Ramsey?
Yeah, so this is the same color legend, same rules, but these are the percent of votes for Mo Brooks. So you can see everything is a lot lighter because he didn't pull as high a percent in pretty much anywhere. Even the counties that he won, like we said, those were close races. So it's not going to be as dark as some of the ones on the Britt map. But you can see it's like the inverse of that Katie Britt map, where instead of having that U-shape, that cup, you have, what would be the filling of that cup, or however you want to say it, that sort of chunk starting in the Huntsville area and going down through the Birmingham Metro, which is where really that's like the full base of Mo Brooks' support during this election. So the question again will be whether he can pull some of the votes in those rural counties that Mike Durant ended up getting. It's a sizable chunk of votes.
Well, and I want to quickly just pull over to that. And this is the percentage of Mike Durant. Now, we know that, again, he came in third in this race. He is not headed to the runoff, but he did pull about 23% of the statewide vote to Mo Brooks's like 28, 29%. So he was third place here, but he wasn't that far off of Mo Brooks. So here is the map of Mike Durant's voters. So where did we see a big show out here? I mean, it looks kind of scattershot.
Yeah, and I think that's important. You have some of those same rural counties that Katie Britt sort of dominated in. You see Durant getting some votes there, but like you said, it's all over the place, which I think is, I mean, frankly, it's good news for Mo Brooks. I mean, his hope is to get as many of those votes as he can, and to broaden his base of support away from that kind of urban pipeline into more rural Alabama. And so the fact that Durant did pretty well kind of all over is a good sign that maybe Brooks can pick up some votes in other parts of the state.
And what's interesting to me, just looking at this Durant percentage map here, is it looks like I think that's Dallas County where he might have gotten the most of the votes there, and that's interesting to me. I don't think that I would have expected that, especially he is right now a resident of North Alabama, and he didn't pull a lot of votes from North Alabama. It seems like they preferred Mo Brooks in this election.
Yeah, and Durant beat Brooks in Dallas County. He got a third of the vote there. But again, that's one of those counties where it's important to note that the vote totals were pretty low. Dallas County's in the Black Belt. It's a majority Black county, and it's a majority Democrat. Just 500 or so people cast a ballot in this election. So he did get a big percentage of those, but it's still not a huge vote total.
Now, we know, again, this runoff, Katie Britt, former chief of staff here for Senator Richard Shelby, who is retiring and opens up this seat that they are running for. Katie Britt will go into that runoff against current Representative Mo Brooks. That runoff is going to be June the 21st. And one thing that we should note as well is that you cannot vote in that runoff if you voted on Tuesday in the Democratic primaries. So this is when the state's crossover voting rules come into play. We will have more coverage of that. We can link for you here. But again, you cannot vote in that runoff if you voted in the Democratic primary. You either need to have not voted at all, voted in the Republican Party, or had a nonpartisan ballot here. So, Ramsey, thank you for breaking this all down. We're going to leave the link here to your story where people can click on those maps, interact with them, and kind of dive into their part of the state and see how their part of the state voted. Thanks, Ramsey, so much. Everybody watching, thank you so much. We'll see you tomorrow.